Commander Zraak'tel adjusted his ceremonial battle sash and glanced around the amphitheater. 300 of the Taurian Hegemony's finest military officers sat in perfect rows, their four-fingered hands folded neatly on the polished obsidian tables. The air filtration system hummed efficiently, maintaining the precise methane-oxygen mixture preferred by high-ranking Taurians. "Welcome, esteemed colleagues, to today's tactical briefing," Zraak'tel began, his voice projecting through the room's perfect acoustics. "I see by your bright eye membranes that you're all very excited to hear about our glorious victories against the humans." The silence was deafening. "That was a joke," Zraak'tel said, his secondary breathing sacs deflating with an audible whoosh. "Something I've picked up from our adversaries. You'll have to forgive me. After studying humans for 3 cycles, their bizarre communication patterns become infectious." He tapped a control pad, and a holographic display of the Orion spur materialized above the central podium. Red and blue markers indicated Taurian and human territories, respectively. There was alarmingly more blue than there had been 6 months ago. "Let us address the gas giant in the room," Zraak'tel continued. "The Taurian hegemony has conquered 17 star systems over 6 centuries. We possess energy weapons capable of splitting moons. Our computational networks can predict stellar weather patterns centuries in advance. We have mastered faster than light travel, perfected genetic engineering, and developed artificial gravity that doesn't make anyone vomit during rapid acceleration." He paused, letting his eye ridges rise expressively. "And yet somehow we find ourselves being systematically dismantled by hairless bipeds who still enjoy fermenting grain and watching competitive ball throwing." A nervous trill rippled through the audience. General Vorx's facial spines flattened against his skull, a sign of extreme displeasure. Zraak'tel didn't care. Someone needed to speak the truth. "This is not a failure of our technology," Zraak'tel said, his voice dropping an octave to indicate seriousness. "This is not a failure of our resources. This is a failure to understand our enemy on a fundamental psychological level." The hologram shifted to display footage from the Battle of Proxima Centauri. Taurian cruisers, elegant and precise, moved in perfect formation. Then human vessels blocky, asymmetrical, and frankly offensive to Taurian aesthetic sensibilities swarmed like insects, breaking formation, executing maneuvers that no simulator had predicted. "Look at this chaos," Zraak'tel said. "No unified formation. No discernible attack pattern. It's as if each ship captain decided to invent tactics on the spot. Which, as we've learned, is precisely what they did." Zraak'tel moved to the edge of the stage, his claws clicking against the polished floor. "Today's briefing is not about celebrating our superiority. We've done enough of that, and our ceremonial victory halls remain embarrassingly empty of human trophies. No, today we will examine why our traditional tactics are failing against an objectively inferior species." He took a deep breath through his primary respiratory tract. "Today, esteemed colleagues, we will learn why humans, despite bleeding, despite dying, despite being outgunned and outnumbered, continue to fight with such ferocity that they've driven our strategic planning division into what their medical professionals would call a nervous breakdown." Zraak'tel activated his personal bioscanner, confirming what he already suspected. His stress hormones were spiking to levels that would concern any medical professional. He deliberately slowed his tertiary heart and continued. "For those who don't know me, I am Commander Zraak'tel, formerly of the 7th Expeditionary Fleet. Currently, I serve as the Hegemony's reluctant expert on human combat psychology. This was not my career goal. I wanted to design recreational spacecraft. Instead, I have survived 3 direct engagements with humans, which apparently makes me uniquely qualified for this position. Or, as the humans would say, the last one standing gets to clean up the mess." He gestured to a scarred Taurian sitting in the front row, who wore the distinctive gold-trimmed uniform of High Command. Admiral Pelnar can attest to the severity of our tactical miscalculations. He lost his left manipulator arm during the Epsilon Indy engagement when human commandos boarded his flagship. They used what humans call a fire axe, not a plasma cutter, not a molecular disruptor, of a metal wedge on a stick, designed for emergency situations. The Admiral's medical team still hasn't figured out how to reattach the arm, which is currently being used as a coat rack in some human captains' quarters. But if intercepted communications are to be believed, Admiral Pelnar's throat sacs inflated slightly in acknowledgement. His replacement mechanical arm whirred quietly. We also have with us Science Director Qualnick, whose department has produced 17 comprehensive psychological profiles of humans. All of them wrong. Zraak'tel's voice dripped with what humans would recognize as sarcasm. His latest report predicted that humans would surrender after losing 40% of their combat forces. In reality, they became 60% more aggressive. Director Qualnick is currently working on Revision 18. I wish him better luck this time. Qualnick's skin flushed a deep purple, but he remained silent. Most recently, we captured intelligence officer Lissa Blackwood during the skirmish at Tau Ceti. Through extensive questioning, which she called, and I quote, "the most boring conversation I've had since my ex-explained fantasy sports leagues." We gained disturbing insights into human military thinking. Zraak'tel brought up a holographic image of the human prisoner. Unlike most species the Taurians had encountered, who reacted to capture with either cowering submission or dignified resignation, Intelligence Officer Blackwood had maintained an unsettling cheerfulness throughout her confinement. Officer Blackwood explained to me that humans have a concept called gallows humor. When asked to elaborate, she said, "If you're going to die anyway, you might as well laugh about it." This is not a translation error. Humans genuinely find their impending mortality funny. When I pointed out that this seems psychologically damaging, she replied, "That's the point. Commander Zax." She then proceeded to call me Zax for the remainder of the interrogation, despite multiple corrections. Zraak'tel paused, his facial tendrils twitching with barely concealed distress. "I must confess, esteemed colleagues, that studying humans has left me with a mixture of horror and, against my better judgment, something approaching respect. They are, without question, the most terrifying species we have ever encountered. Not because they are strong, but because they simply refuse to accept defeat as a possibility. And even when it is a mathematical certainty. Zraak'tel dimmed the chamber's ambient lighting and expanded the holographic display. The star system of Proxima Centauri rotated slowly above the assembled officers. "The Battle of Proxima Centauri should have been a decisive Taurian victory," Zraak'tel began, his voice resonating with the particular harmonic Taurians used to indicate historical significance. "We deployed 23 capital ships, 42 cruisers, and 117 support vessels. The humans had 11 capital ships and 38 smaller vessels. Our energy output capabilities exceeded theirs by a factor of 3.7. Our computational systems outperformed theirs by several orders of magnitude. Fleet Marshal Dorn himself declared the engagement would be, and I'm quoting precisely here, a routine pacification operation worthy of perhaps a footnote in this cycle's military achievements." The hologram shifted to display the initial battle formation. Taurian vessels arranged in the classic hegemony spearhead formation, a tactical arrangement refined over centuries of successful conquests. As you can see, we positioned our forces according to the grand tactical doctrine of overwhelming technological superiority. We expected the humans to attempt a strategic withdrawal when they realized the mathematical impossibility of victory. Zraak'tel paused, clicking his mandibles together in the Taurian expression of bitter amusement. Instead, they did this. The hologram showed the human vessels breaking formation, scattering in seemingly random patterns before regrouping into smaller attack clusters. Several smaller craft accelerated to speeds that their engines shouldn't have been capable of. Later analysis revealed they had disabled multiple safety protocols and redlined their propulsion systems beyond sustainable limits. What you're witnessing isn't a malfunction in our tactical display. This is actually what happened. There was no cohesive strategy, no unified command structure apparent in their movements. Each vessel captain appeared to be improvising tactics on the spot, coordinating with nearby ships in what can only be described as chaotic opportunism. He highlighted a human cruiser that was venting atmosphere from its port side but continuing to fight. The human vessel Intrepid lost life support to 3 decks but continued combat operations. When our sensors detected this vulnerability, we naturally targeted those sections to cause a catastrophic breach. Standard doctrine, yes? Force the enemy to divert resources to emergency containment. The hologram zoomed in on the damaged cruiser. The humans did the opposite. They sealed off the affected sections, presumably sacrificing the crew trapped there, and rerouted power from life support to weapons systems. They then accelerated toward our support vessels, firing all weapons with what our tactical analysts described as reckless disregard for power management protocols. Zraak'tel tapped his control pad, bringing up an audio transmission. We intercepted this communication from Captain Marcus Rivera of the human flagship Determination. At this point in the battle, he had lost 23 ships and was facing our largely intact primary battle group. The audio crackled through the amphitheater's speakers. A human voice, sounding strangely calm despite background noises of alarms and explosions. All right, boys and girls, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're getting our asses kicked 6 ways to Sunday. Thompson, I see that look, wipe it off your face. We're not dead yet, which means we still have a job to do. Jensen, get me firing solutions for their command ship. Peters, redirect emergency power to forward shields. And somebody get me a coffee if I'm going to die today. I refuse to do it uncaffeinated. Muffled laughter could be heard in the background before the transmission ended. Note the laughter, Zraak'tel said, his voice lowering. Their vessel is critically damaged. Half their fleet is destroyed. Their commanding officer acknowledges they are losing. And yet they laugh. This is the psychological weapon we failed to account for in our tactical simulations. Zraak'tel brought up another intercept: text communications between human vessels. After losing their primary communications array, human ships reverted to an ancient system they call Morse code transmitted via directed light pulses. When translated, one message from the destroyer Toronto to the cruiser Sydney read, "Looks like we brought fists to a gunfight. Want to see if these aliens can dance?" The Sydney's response, "Roger that. Let's cut in. Save me a waltz." Zraak'tel looked up from the display, his eyes scanning the now silent audience. 17 minutes after this exchange, those 2 vessels executed a pincer maneuver that destroyed our flagship Inevitable Dominance and killed High Commander Vrex U, along with 3,200 crew members. They used their own damaged vessels as kinetic weapons, deliberately colliding with our ship after overloading their reactor cores. He shut down the hologram, bringing the chamber lights back to standard illumination. We lost that battle despite overwhelming tactical advantages because we fundamentally misunderstood human psychology. Their capacity to joke in the face of certain death isn't merely a cultural curiosity. It's a tactical asset that our strategic doctrine had no framework to counter. Zraak'tel's posture stiffened as he moved to the next segment of his presentation. The mild sedative his medical implant had just released into his bloodstream wasn't quite enough to steady his nerves. The memory was still too fresh, too raw. I will now share my personal observations from the Battle of Epsilon Eridani, which occurred just 42 cycles ago. This was not a historical engagement I studied in archives. This was my battle, my ship, my crew. He activated a 3-dimensional tactical display showing the Epsilon Eridani system, focusing on the 4th planet's orbital space. We arrived with a standard pacification fleet, 7 capital ships including my command vessel, the ordained Triumph, plus supporting craft. Our mission was to secure the mining operations on the 4th planet, which human forces had recently claimed in violation of hegemony territorial decrees. The display showed the initial deployment of Taurian forces in a classic encirclement pattern around the planet. Our intelligence indicated a minimal human presence, perhaps 3 or 4 defensive vessels. We expected to broadcast our surrender protocols, demonstrate our firepower on an uninhabited portion of the planet, and have the mining facilities transferred to hegemony control within 1 standard cycle. Zraak'tel's breathing accelerated slightly despite his sedative. We detected no human ships upon arrival. Our sensors showed only standard commercial vessels near the orbital stations. According to protocol, we established a standard communication network between our vessels, positioning relay satellites to ensure optimal command coordination. Fleet operations proceeded exactly according to the Grand Tactical Manual, Section 47, paragraphs 12 through 19. He tapped a control, and the display shifted to show the system 6 hours later. At precisely 0340 ship time, every single one of our communication relays was destroyed simultaneously. Not damaged, destroyed. Before our sensor officers could even report the disruption, our intership communication network collapsed. The hologram showed a chaotic scatter of Taurian ships, their formation broken. You must understand something about Taurian military structure, Zraak'tel explained, his voice taking on a professorial tone. Since the Third Unification War, our command protocols have been designed around perfect information sharing and hierarchical decision-making. Every vessel captain receives precise instructions from command ships. Every weapons officer receives exact firing solutions. This system has served us flawlessly in 17 planetary conquests. He gestured to the confusion displayed in the hologram. But humans specifically target communication first. Not weapons systems, not propulsion, communication. They understand instinctively what our military theorists failed to recognize as a vulnerability, our psychological dependence on unified command. The display zoomed out, showing the previously undetected human ships emerging from behind the system's asteroid belt and natural satellites. They had hidden their vessels by powering down completely, using the natural bodies in the system for thermal and electromagnetic concealment. Primitive but effective. While our ships tried to re-establish communications, the humans struck with perfect coordination. The hologram showed human vessels moving with surprising precision, targeting specific Taurian ships in sequence. They attacked our vessels in order of size smallest to largest, an inversion of standard Taurian doctrine. It generated confusion among our captains. Should they defend the smaller ships or protect the capital vessels? Without clear communication, each captain made individual decisions, further fracturing our response. Zraak'tel's voice lowered to a near whisper, forcing the officers to lean forward. The humans targeted our engineering sections with precision strikes. Not to destroy our vessels outright, but to damage them, and to wound them. In Taurian naval doctrine, a damaged ship withdraws for repairs. This is logical, efficient, and preserves valuable military assets. His facial tendrils twitched with remembered horror. But when human ships were damaged, they did not withdraw. They became more aggressive, more reckless. The human vessel Defiant lost its main weapons array to our interceptors. Logic dictated they would retreat. Instead, the hologram showed the damaged human ship accelerating directly toward a Taurian cruiser. They rammed our ship at near relativistic speed. Both vessels were destroyed instantly. No attempt to retreat, no distress signals. They simply converted their damaged vessel into a kinetic weapon. Zraak'tel paused, allowing the audience to absorb the implications. This behavior was not an isolated incident. 3 other human vessels performed similar maneuvers. It wasn't desperation. It was doctrine. What we see as mechanical failure, they see as a tactical opportunity. He moved from behind the podium, standing directly before the assembled officers. My own vessel, the ordained Triumph, was boarded by human Marines after our propulsion system was compromised. I commanded the defense personally. Our security forces outnumbered the human boarders 3-1. We were fighting within our own ship, an environment we knew intimately. Zraak'tel unconsciously touched the scarred portion of his face crest. The humans breached our command deck singing, not communicating tactical information, not coordinating their assault, singing. A battle hymn, we later learned, called Blood on the Risers. As they engaged our security teams in close quarters combat, several of them were laughing. Not the stress reaction our xenopsychologists theorized, genuine amusement. He displayed footage from the ship's security system, human Marines in powered armor, moving with practiced precision through Taurian corridors. The audio captured voices calling out casualties and tactical positions, interspersed with jokes. Taking fire, East Corridor. Jenkins is down. Well, tell him to get up. We're on a schedule here. Brag out. Fire in the hole. Hey, Captain. These aliens look like angry lobsters. In focus, Martinez. You can look for melted butter later. Scattered laughter followed the exchange, even as plasma fire scorched the walls around them. I lost 62 security personnel in that engagement, Zraak'tel said quietly. The humans lost 17 Marines. They accomplished their objective planting demolition charges in our engineering section and withdrew. Before leaving, their commander looked directly at me and said, "Better luck next time, crab cakes. Next time." As if this were some form of sport. He returned to the podium, regaining his composure. Fleet Marshal Dorn has now mandated psychological preparation before any engagement with human forces. All ship captains must complete a 40-cycle training program designed to insulate them from the psychological impact of human combat behaviors. Yet our mental health treatment facilities remain overwhelmed with veterans of human engagements. Zraak'tel switched off the hologram. The Grand Tactical Manual, which has guided our military for 9 centuries, has been supplemented with a new section, Anomalous Combat Psychology. The human exception. It is the first time in our history that an entire species has required a dedicated tactical exemption. Zraak'tel moved to the center of the stage, his posture now rigid with what the assembled officers recognized as the formal stance of one delivering grave news. The lighting in the chamber shifted to the somber blue-green spectrum traditionally used for acknowledging military defeats. We have discussed tactical errors and psychological miscalculations, but now we must address the strategic error that fundamentally changed our understanding of humans. Zraak'tel said, his voice resonating with ceremonial gravity. The error that cost us the 7th Fleet and forced the High Command to reconsider our entire approach to this conflict. He activated a simplified star chart showing the contested border regions between Taurian and human space. Our strategic doctrine has always operated on a fundamental assumption that any rational species will surrender when defeat becomes mathematically certain. This assumption has proven valid across 17 conquered species. It is logical. It preserves lives. It acknowledges reality. Zraak'tel's secondary breathing vents flared. But humans do not surrender when defeat is certain. They fight harder. They become more creative, more vicious, more willing to sacrifice. This defies game theory. It defies rational self-interest. It should not work. And yet, the holographic display shifted to show the Arcturus system, focusing on its 4th planet. New Anchorage. A human colony with a population of approximately 12 million. Strategic value, minimal. Economic value, negligible. Military significance, none. Perfect for demonstrating the consequences of continued resistance. The room grew unnaturally quiet as the officers anticipated what would come next. The Strategic Command determined that destroying this colony would demonstrate Taurian resolve without compromising valuable resource acquisition targets. The humans would see the mathematical futility of resistance and negotiate surrender terms. Zraak'tel's voice became clinically detached, a defense mechanism the officers recognized. We deployed a minimal force just enough to overwhelm the planet's defenses and conduct an orbital bombardment. The operation was executed with textbook precision. The colony was destroyed. Casualty rate, 98.7%. He let the silence hang for a moment. We expected the humans to open diplomatic channels within one standard cycle. Instead, the display expanded to show a massive convergence of ships, human vessels of every size and configuration, including civilian craft hastily converted for military use. Every human vessel within 3 sectors altered course and converged on our fleet. Civilian transports fitted with improvised weapons, mining ships carrying explosive cargoes, military vessels operating beyond recommended fuel ranges. They abandoned defensive positions, strategic resources, even their own colonies. The holographic recreation showed the human armada descending on the Taurian fleet like a swarm. They didn't attempt to negotiate. They didn't offer terms. They attacked with a coordination and ferocity we had not previously encountered. And they transmitted a single message on all frequencies, in clear text, without encryption. It was meant for us to hear, for all of us to hear. Zraak'tel tapped his console, and a human voice filled the chamber. Remember New Anchorage. After a moment, he continued, we lost 18 capital ships and 37 support vessels. Casualties exceeded 20,000. The human losses were proportionally higher, but they considered this an acceptable exchange. Zraak'tel's facial tendrils contracted into the expression of profound disquiet. After the battle, we intercepted communications between human command vessels. They were not lamenting their losses or questioning their tactics. They were discussing how the destruction of our fleet would serve as, and I quote, a message to the rest of the crab bastards. He looked directly at the assembled officers. This is the concept that our xenopsychologists have struggled to translate properly, making an example. Humans do not fight only to defeat the enemy before them. They fight to instill fear in all potential future enemies. They weaponize terror. They ensure that their victories are so devastating, so complete, that others will hesitate to challenge them. Zraak'tel's voice lowered to almost a whisper. They don't just defeat you. They make you regret ever having encountered them. Zraak'tel straightened his ceremonial sash and gestured for the lights to return to full illumination. The mood in the amphitheater had changed dramatically since the beginning of his presentation. Gone was the rigid formality typical of Taurian military briefings. The officers sat with postures that indicated disturbed contemplation, head crests partially flattened, breathing synchronized into the pattern of collective concern. I am now authorized to share classified information directly from the Supreme Command, Zraak'tel announced, deactivating his security clearance with a quick gesture across his neural interface. The holographic display flickered with verification symbols before revealing a diplomatic communique. The Taurian High Command has initiated peace talks with the Human Interstellar Alliance. A ripple of surprise moved through the assembled officers. Several rose partially from their seats before military discipline reasserted itself. This is not an admission of defeat, Zraak'tel continued, though his tone suggested otherwise. This is a strategic recalibration based on new understanding of human psychology. Allow me to explain what our xenopsychologists and military strategists have finally come to comprehend about our adversaries. He brought up footage from various human engagements they had studied. Humans do not seek to annihilate their enemies. This isn't due to mercy or compassion as we understand those concepts. Rather, they wish to instill such profound terror that future conflict becomes literally unthinkable. They wish their enemies to exist, but to exist in fear. Zraak'tel displayed intercepted footage from a human military academy lecture. In their own tactical doctrine, from their ancient history to present day, they have a concept called deterrence through overwhelming demonstration. One human military theorist wrote, "The perfect victory isn't destroying your enemy completely, it's making them never want to fight you again." He switched to footage of the peace delegation preparations. Our interrogation of intelligence officer Blackwood yielded this insight. When asked why humans fought with such seemingly irrational ferocity, she explained, "We don't fight to win battles. We fight to win peace." When pressed to clarify this apparent contradiction, she said, "The best enemy isn't a dead enemy. It's an enemy who wakes up every morning and thinks, not today. I'm not messing with those humans today." Zraak'tel closed the holographic display entirely and stepped forward to address the officers directly. The Taurian Hegemony has conquered 17 star systems through overwhelming technological superiority. But our strategic doctrine has always focused on resource efficiency and logical deployment of assets. We fight to acquire and preserve. Humans fight to terrify and deter. He paused, allowing his breathing vents to fully expand. The peace negotiations are not proceeding as expected. The humans are not demanding significant territorial concessions. They are not requesting technological transfers or resource rights. Their primary demand is public acknowledgement of their military victories and establishment of a demilitarized buffer zone. In essence, they want us to formally recognize that we fear them. Zraak'tel made the gesture that indicated darkly humorous resignation. High Command is expected to accept these terms. Our xenopsychologists believe this will satisfy the human need for psychological victory without requiring further bloodshed. They hypothesize that humans will then redirect their alarming creativity and aggression toward other pursuits. He looked around at the silent officers. For those of you concerned about future career opportunities in our glorious military, I am pleased to inform you that the hegemony's next territorial expansion has already been planned. It will be conducted in literally any direction away from human space. A wave of nervous laughter rippled through the audience, the first genuine amusement expressed during the entire briefing. Zraak'tel waited for silence before delivering his final observations. "I have spent 3 cycles studying humans. I have fought them, interrogated them, and analyzed their tactics. I have watched them laugh in the face of certain death. I have seen them sacrifice themselves not with resignation but with bitter jokes on their lips." He paused, his facial tendrils arranging themselves into an expression rarely seen in formal Taurian settings: introspective uncertainty. "The most disturbing realization I've come to, one I share with you now as a warning, is that after all this time studying humans, I have begun to understand their humor. I even find myself appreciating it. Yesterday, when informed of the peace talks, I caught myself thinking, well, that was a waste of perfectly good conquest preparation." Zraak'tel's voice dropped to a near whisper. "That thought, colleagues, that involuntary moment of grim amusement in the face of defeat terrifies me more than any human weapon. Because it suggests they haven't just defeated our bodies. They've infected our minds.